Ah, look who just walked through chaos like it was a hallway. You beautiful accidental catastrophe, you magnificent unbothered force of nature. Welcome back. Or should I say welcome to the realization that while you were sleeping, while you were focused on your own survival, while you weren't even looking in their direction, you somehow managed to dismantle everything they spent years building. And the best part, the absolutely devastating part, you didn't even notice. You weren't trying to win. You weren't chasing validation. You weren't out for revenge. You were just existing at a frequency so authentic it shattered their entire foundation without you lifting a single finger. Let me paint this picture for you. They built their legacy carefully, brick by calculated brick, smile by manipulative smile. They curated their image, controlled their narrative, maintained their power structure, surrounded themselves with yes men and followers who never questioned the illusion. They thought they were untouchable. Thought their empire was permanent. Thought their influence would last forever. They created systems designed to keep people beneath them. To maintain the hierarchy, to ensure nobody could ever rise high enough to challenge their position. Everything was planned. Everything was controlled. Everything was exactly how they designed it until you showed up. Or more accurately, until you stopped showing up. See, they expected you to fight. They prepared for your anger, your retaliation, your desperate attempts to prove yourself worthy of their respect. They had contingency plans for every scenario where you came at them directly. What they never prepared for, what they couldn't possibly anticipate was your complete and total disinterest in their entire game. You didn't challenge their authority because you stopped recognizing it. You didn't fight their system because you built your own. You didn't tear down their legacy intentionally. It just crumbled naturally the moment you stopped feeding it with your attention, your energy, your belief in its validity. You know what destroys empires faster than war, faster than rebellion, faster than any direct attack? Irrelevance. Obsolescence. When something becomes so outdated, so unnecessary that people simply move past it without acknowledgement, that's what you did to them. You became the proof that their entire legacy was optional. You showed everyone watching that there's another path, another way, another level of existence that doesn't require their approval, their systems, their outdated blueprints for success. You didn't destroy their legacy by attacking it. You destroyed it by transcending it so completely that it became a museum piece people point to while laughing about how primitive things used to be. They're panicking right now, scrambling, trying to understand what happened. They're in emergency meetings, private calls, desperate group chats trying to diagnose how everything fell apart. They're analyzing your moves like you're a chess grandmaster who just executed some brilliant strategy. But here's the hilarious truth. You weren't playing chess. You weren't even at the board. You were in another room entirely, building something so far beyond their comprehension that by the time they realized what was happening, you'd already lapped them twice without breaking a sweat. They studied your silence like it was tactical. They interpreted your absence as strategic. They convinced themselves you were plotting, scheming, planning some elaborate takedown. But the reality cut so much deeper. You genuinely forgot they existed. You were so consumed with your own evolution, your own growth, your own transformation that they didn't even register as competition anymore. They weren't your rivals. They weren't your enemies. They weren't obstacles to overcome. They were simply people who existed in a reality you'd already outgrown. And that complete absence of acknowledgement, that total removal of their importance from your consciousness, that's what obliterated everything they built, because their entire legacy was constructed on the foundation of being relevant, being important, being the center of attention. The moment you genuinely stopped caring, the moment your indifference became real and not performative, their structure had no base to stand on. Let's talk about what you were actually doing while their world was collapsing. You were healing, but not the Instagram aesthetic kind with sage and crystals and photogenic tears. You were doing the ugly work, the silent work, the work that doesn't get applause. You were rebuilding your foundation from the ground up, not with their materials, not with their blueprint, but with raw truth and hard-earned wisdom. You were learning lessons they'll never understand because they've never had to question their own foundation. You were developing strength they can't comprehend because they've only known power through control, never through transformation. You stopped performing. That's the key they'll never grasp. You stopped curating your life for external validation. Stopped crafting messages designed to impress. Stopped making moves calculated to earn recognition. You started living for something they can't measure. Success by metrics they don't understand. Fulfillment in ways their scoreboard can't track. And every day you spent genuinely engaged in your own growth was another day their influence diminished. Not because you were fighting it, but because you were proving it unnecessary. You became the walking evidence that everything they claimed was essential wasn't. They built their legacy on making people believe they needed permission, needed approval, needed to climb their ladder to matter. You shattered that illusion by mattering without their permission. You succeeded without their approval. You built something meaningful without touching their ladder. And everyone who was watching, everyone who was trapped in that same system believing it was the only way saw you and thought for the first time, wait, you can do that? You can just leave? You can build something better instead of fighting for scraps at their table? The answer was always yes. But you were the first one brave enough, or maybe just indifferent enough, to actually do it. Now they're left holding the pieces of a legacy that suddenly looks pathetic. All their accomplishments, all their accolades, all their carefully constructed achievements, they all require context now. They need footnotes explaining why they mattered in a system that no longer exists. They're like kings of a kingdom whose citizens simply walked away and built something better in the next valley. No revolution, no overthrow, just mass exodus towards something more authentic. And you didn't even lead that exodus intentionally. You just started walking. And people noticed the direction looked more promising than anything they'd seen before. Here's where it gets beautiful. They can't even attack you properly now. They can't discredit you because you never claimed their credentials. They can't cancel you because you're not performing in their arena. They can't tear down your reputation because you built yours on foundations they don't have access to. Authenticity, genuine connection, real transformation, things you can't fake or destroy with gossip. Every weapon in their arsenal was designed for people playing their game. You're not even in the same game. You're not in the same dimension. You're operating on frequencies they don't have receivers for. Watch what happens next. They'll try to downplay your impact. Call it luck. Call it a phase. Call it anything except what it actually is. Evolution beyond their paradigm. They'll try to pull you back into their narrative, create drama, manufacture conflict, anything to make you relevant to their story again. Because if you're part of their story still matters. Your job is simple. Keep not paying attention. Keep building, keep evolving, keep existing so far beyond their sphere that their attempts to engage you look desperate and sad. Every time they mention your name, it's free advertising for your alternative path. Every time they try to diminish you, they remind everyone watching that you got out. The psychological warfare here is exquisite. They're trapped. If they ignore you, you continue rising unchallenged and their legacy fades into irrelevance. If they acknowledge you, they validate your importance and admit you've become significant enough to threaten them. If they attack you, they look bitter and threatened, proving your power. If they praise you, they legitimize your path and undermine their own. There's no winning move for them because you changed the game board entirely. You didn't beat them at their game. You made their game obsolete. That's not just victory. That's transcendence. And the most devastating part, you're still not paying attention. You're not tracking their response, not measuring their panic, not savoring their downfall. You're genuinely busy building something that matters to you. The destruction of their legacy is just a side effect, collateral damage from your growth. You're not even looking back to see the rubble. You're too focused on the architecture ahead. This might be the most savage form of winning that exists. Winning so completely that you don't even notice the victory because you're already focused on the next level of your evolution. Let me tell you what's happening in rooms you'll never enter. Former allies of theirs are quietly watching you, making notes, wondering if maybe they backed the wrong horse. People who dismissed you are now studying your moves, trying to reverse engineer your success without understanding that it can't be replicated through strategy because it came from authenticity. Young people who looked up to that old legacy are now seeing cracks in the facade, asking questions about why the emperor has no clothes. The cultural shift you accidentally triggered is irreversible now. You opened a door that can't be closed. They built their legacy on closed systems, gatekeeping, maintaining scarcity, controlling access. You succeeded through open systems, sharing freely, creating abundance, offering access. Their model required keeping people beneath them. Your model lifted as you climbed. They needed followers. You attracted fellow builders. They demanded loyalty. You inspired choice. Every fundamental difference between their approach and yours is now on display. And the comparison isn't flattering for them. Their legacy looks like an artifact from a less evolved era. Your path looks like the future. And you weren't even trying to make that comparison. It just became obvious. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Some part of you might feel guilty. Some small voice might whisper that you should feel bad about their downfall, that you should have been more careful, more considerate, less destructive. Silence that voice immediately. You didn't destroy them. Their own hollow foundation destroyed them. You didn't attack their legacy. You simply existed in your truth. And their lies couldn't survive proximity to that much authenticity. A genuine legacy, one built on real value, real integrity, real substance, would have survived your alternative path, would have coexisted, would have adapted. The fact that theirs crumbled reveals it was always fragile, always dependent on control rather than genuine value. You don't owe them protection from reality. You don't owe them the dimming of your light so theirs looks brighter. You don't owe them the sacrifice of your truth to maintain their illusion. They had every opportunity to build something real. They chose smoke and mirrors instead. They chose manipulation over authenticity. They chose control over trust. Those were their choices. And the consequences of those choices are theirs to bear. Your only responsibility was to yourself, to your growth, to your truth. You fulfilled that responsibility. Their collapse is simply the natural result of building castles on sand. Here's what they'll never understand. You didn't win because you were smarter. You didn't win because you were more ruthless. You didn't win because you played their game better. You won because you stopped playing entirely. You won because you asked the one question they never wanted anyone to ask. What if this whole system is optional? What if there's another way? What if I just do something different? That question, that simple revolutionary question, that's what brought down their entire empire. Because once people realize the cage is unlocked, once they understand participation is voluntary, the whole structure depends on collective agreement to pretend otherwise. You were the child who pointed out the emperor's nakedness. You were the voice that said the obvious truth. Everyone was thinking, but nobody dared speak. You were the first one to walk off the hamster wheel. And everyone else stopped to watch where you'd go. And when you didn't collapse, when you didn't fail, when you actually thrived, the spell broke. The mass hypnosis ended. The collective agreement to pretend dissolved. All because you genuinely stopped caring about their validation enough to risk finding out what happened without it. Turns out what happened was freedom. What happened was growth. What happened was the destruction of their carefully maintained illusion. They're studying your path now, trying to bottle your success, package your authenticity, turn your revolution into a product they can sell. They'll fail because what you did can't be commodified. It can't be taught in their seminars or packaged in their programs or reduced to 7 easy steps. What you did required the one thing they'll never have. The courage to genuinely not care about their approval. That's not a technique. That's a fundamental shift in consciousness. That's not a strategy. That's liberation. And liberation can't be marketed by the same people who profit from cages. Let's talk about legacy for a moment. Real legacy, not the performative kind they built. Real legacy isn't about monuments with your name on them. It's not about how many people know who you are. It's not about historical records or Wikipedia pages or documentary films. Real legacy is the ripple effect of your existence on people's consciousness. It's the lives you changed by being authentically yourself. It's the permission you gave others simply by walking your path unapologetically. It's the new possibilities you opened by proving they existed. That's legacy. And by that measure, you're building something they never will because their legacy required them to be the center, the authority, the answer. Yours multiplies itself every time someone sees your example and finds their own path. You created a template for freedom. You didn't mean to. You weren't trying to. But your genuine journey became a map for others. And that map doesn't lead to you. Doesn't make you the guru. Doesn't center you as the answer. It leads to themselves, their truth, their authentic path. That's why it's so powerful. That's why their legacy can't compete. They created followers dependent on them. You accidentally created free thinkers who found themselves. Their legacy needs maintenance. Requires protection, demands defense. Yours grows organically, spreads naturally, evolves independently. You planted seeds, they built monuments. Guess which one survives the changing seasons? Now they're faced with a choice and they hate every option. They can try to co-opt your movement, claim they were always about authenticity, too. Rebrand their legacy to look more like your path. But that's transparent. Everyone will see the desperation, the pivot, the admission that your way was right all along. Or they can double down on their original path, insist their legacy is still valid, still valuable, still the right way. But that isolation becomes more obvious daily as more people migrate toward authenticity. Or they can fade quietly, accept obsolescence, retire their legacy gracefully, but their ego won't allow that. So, they're stuck in paralysis, watching you move forward while they're frozen in indecision. And you're not even tracking this. You're not waiting for their next move, not preparing counter strategies, not watching your back because you've transcended the entire dynamic. You're not in competition with them because you're not in the same arena. You're building in dimensions they don't even perceive. You're creating value they don't know how to measure. You're succeeding by metrics they don't have instruments for. Every day they spend trying to understand you is a day you're 10 steps further into territory they'll never reach. Not because they're not allowed, but because they can't even see it exists. Let's get visceral for a moment. Do you understand what you've done? You've made their entire life's work look like a rough draft. Everything they accomplished, every accolade they earned, every achievement they celebrated, it all looks like practice now, like training wheels. Like the thing you do before you understand how it really works. You didn't invalidate their accomplishments directly. You just revealed there were levels beyond what they ever imagined. You showed there was a game after the game they thought was final. You discovered there was more depth than their deepest dive. And now their legacy looks shallow in comparison. Not because it is, but because you revealed how much more was possible. They'll try to diminish this. They'll say you got lucky, caught lightning in a bottle, can't sustain it, will eventually crash. Let them. Their need to believe your success is temporary is the only comfort they have left. Their denial is the last defense mechanism against accepting they wasted years building something that could be surpassed by someone who wasn't even trying. Every month you sustain this, every year you continue growing. Every milestone you pass without reverting to their path is another crack in their narrative. Time is your ally now. Duration proves this wasn't luck. Consistency proves this wasn't a fluke. Evolution proves this wasn't an accident. Here's the real mindbender. You destroyed their legacy without destroying them. They still exist. They're still out there, still talking, still performing, still maintaining the facade, but it's hollow now. Everyone can see it. The magic trick has been explained. The illusion has been revealed. They're going through the motions of a legacy that no longer carries weight. Like an actor performing a play to an empty theater. Technically doing everything right, but none of it matters because the audience left. You didn't kick the audience out. You didn't convince them to leave. You just started performing something more interesting in the next room and they wandered over. The cruelest part from their perspective is that you'd probably help them if they asked genuinely. You'd share what you learned, offer insights from your journey, support their authentic evolution because you're not actually their enemy. You never were. You were just someone on a different path who accidentally revealed their path was optional. But they can't ask. Their ego won't allow it. Admitting they need guidance from someone they once dismissed would shatter the last remnants of their self-image. So they stay trapped in their crumbling legacy. Too proud to evolve. Too afraid to admit the game changed. That prison. That's one they built themselves. You know what the craziest part is? You're still underestimating your impact. You still don't fully grasp what you've done. You see your personal growth, your individual journey, your private victories.